That said, I do think it's probably time to go ahead and start talking about recent events. And I really don't want to talk about everything that's been going on in Israel all the time, but Jesus Christ, there is a follow-up to the pagers exploding story that I covered recently, and I'm not super thrilled with the developments that have come from that, but let's go over everything so far. For those who don't know, as a recap, a few days ago, there were a bunch of pagers that were held by a mixture of Hezbollah personnel and civilians that detonated and led to, at the time, over 2,000 injuries and about 8 or so deaths. The numbers have risen since then, as we figured they would, but let's go ahead and figure out what's going on here. So I have some notes on this, and I'm going to be reading from mostly those so that I don't get anything wrong. It's also, I'm trying this for a few episodes to see how this feels for y'all and for me, where I'm doing less reading off of somebody else's pages and work and more building off of show notes that I have here. So Israel appears to have been able to infiltrate the supply chain into Lebanon at some point. I think it might be within the last 4 or 5 months, but really a lot of the analysis on this has been quite sporadic and it's a bit all over the place. So it's hard to tell exactly where this is coming from, exactly which shipments have had what and when they have been around. But about 4 to 5 months, there seems to be one shipment that everything is being traced to. Now, there is some potential that the previous explosion attack that happened wasn't actually a planned attack, but a reaction from Netanyahu and his military advisors, because the people who had the pagers were about to discover that the explosives were on them. So it was a, let's go ahead and detonate them now, since they're about to find out. How they knew that they were about to find out, I don't know. That's information that, again, is being floated around Israeli media at the moment. But Israeli media does suggest that Netanyahu decided to detonate the pagers over concerns that Hezbollah was about to discover the booby traps that were in the pagers. And there's a reason that a lot of the casualties where this is happening have been in civilian areas. To put it lightly, the reason is kindness. Now, I'm not saying kindness as the metaphorical idea of kindness, but there's actually a system for Hezbollah called kindness. It is a reserve system where active members who are sympathetic to the Hezbollah cause rotate in and then out back into civilian life. They stay in for a temporary amount of time. Now, when they rotate out, they will often keep certain paraphernalia from their time in Hezbollah. These pagers would be one of them. Why were there pagers in the first place? Why not cell phones? Well, I covered that in the last episode, but basically Hezbollah, their officials believe that Israel is monitoring cell phone and other more modern technological devices, which is not an unfounded fear, right? So what is Hezbollah? We need to get into that real quick so that you know just a little bit of the context. They are a group that believe that Jewish people, and by extension Israel, is made up of blasphemers that are basically damned for all time. They believe that a theocracy dominated by the imams is best, and the annihilation of Israel would be the correct way to go about this. Now, that sounds very extreme, and it is. That is a very extreme thing, but you also need to understand where these people are coming from. They were established in the 90s as a response to Israel's invasion of Lebanon, tracing back how far this conflict can go. So, yes, this is an extremist organization, but when you're invaded by another country, then it is very likely that extremist groups are going to be the ones that carry the torch in the forefront. You're going to have these groups that are going to see Israel, which sees itself as a nationalistic, theocratic, adjacent nation. They're going to respond basically in kind, with a similar nationalistic fervor and a similar religious fervor to combat it. Sorry, I got something in my eye right now that needs to get out. So, while yes, they do have those beliefs that Jewish people are all blasphemers and all that, that's not really any different than the beliefs that Christians in the United States have right now. Seriously, if you're a Christian right now, what do you think a Jewish person is or a pagan person is? As far as a religion is concerned, they are people who are going to be burning in hell. It sounds like a very extremist position, which it is, but it's also a position that people are very numb to and normalized to here in the States, which I don't think a lot of people really consider. Now, with the kindness system, when active members leave rotations, like I said, they often keep basic equipment, like, say, these pagers. They will often keep those as they go. Also, Dan, thank you for reaching a 3-stream streak. When they keep these pagers, if something is wrong with them, if they are booby-trapped, if they are bugged, they will carry that back with them into civilian life. So, as of right now, a lot of people are experiencing blindness, amputations, and all kinds of physical injury and even death as a result of these pagers. But why are we talking about the story again, aside from the extra information that I've gotten about how Hezbollah operates? Well, last night there were more explosions in Lebanon, but not just from pagers this time. These were from Walkie Talkies, which is why Lebanon's been able to actually trace some of these explosive devices back to a single area, because a lot of these walkie-talkies came from the same shipment that a lot of these pagers did. So now we know that this new explosive ordnance that is kind of proliferating around civilian life, because remember, people are rotating in and out of Hezbollah, so they're taking things from their military time into the civilian life, taking things from civilian life into the military time. So far, over 20 people are dead, and 4,000 are injured. Now, I did mention that the pagers were taken from military life into civilian life. So a lot of times people who volunteer into Hezbollah and then leave and go back to civilian life, let's say that we were working in a hospital. It should be noted right now, Lebanon is in an economic crisis, and as a result, their medical system is very underfunded, which is leading to mismanagement. There's too many bodies, not enough helping hands, and far too much stress. So, of course, some of the equipment that they're going to have around them is going to be whatever they manage to keep from their time in Hezbollah, trying to effectively defend their country from Israel, is what it seems to be in their perspective. Now, this is where we get to the scary part, because so far I've only talked about the brass tacks of what has happened, but we got to talk about what's happening afterwards. So Security General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, noted that while this is a terrible tragedy, historically, remote attacks like these are generally used to prelude an escalation of violence. Noteworthy to couple with that fact is the fact that the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, said that Israel was shifting its military focus to the front lines of Hezbollah in the northern area of Israel, trying to advance further to claim more territory. To quote Guterres, obviously the logic of making all of these devices explode is to do it as a preemptive strike before a major military operation. To couple with that, Netanyahu has said that, I have said it before, I will return to the citizens of the north their homes in security, and that is exactly what we are going to do. Again, for Israel, this is reclamation of territory. That is their perspective on this. They think that they are taking all of this back for their citizens, their homes, etc. Whereas from the position of Lebanon, this is an invasion. Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, had a comment to say on this as well, saying that simultaneous targeting of thousands of individuals, whether civilians or members of armed groups, without knowledge as to who is in possession of the targeted device, or their location, or their surroundings at the time of the attack, violates international human rights law and, to the extent applicable, international humanitarian law. This brings us back to the idea of kindness with how the Lebanese people rotate into the military. If Israel is using remote detonations and they have no way of knowing that certain people who have rotated into the military are now out and they are in civilian life, they are living a civilian life now. That is what they are doing, and they are still detonating these explosives. That's a humanitarian violation. 110%, because they are no longer going after strategic military targets. They are going for wanton destruction. That's what that is. Lama Faki, a Middle East and North Africa director at the Human Rights Watch, said that customary international humanitarian law prohibits the use of booby traps, which these pagers most certainly are. Any objects that civilians are likely to be attracted to or are associated with normal civilian daily use. These would be cell phones, these would be pagers, these would be vehicles, these would be anything that you operate normally in your day-to-day life. Booby trapping any of those things, that is considered bad. To continue the quote, any object that civilians are likely to be attracted to or associate with normal civilian daily use, precisely to avoid putting civilians at grave risk and produce the devastating scenes that continue to unfold across Lebanon today. So effectively pointing out that not only is the broad targeting of whomever happens to be carrying a device really, really bad and a humanitarian rights violation, booby traps are also outlawed in warfare because they affect civilians. They affect the lives of children. Again, children have died already as a result of these explosions. We'll get into that a little bit here in a second. Well, actually, I can get into it right now. There was an 8-year-old who died in the initial rain of pager explosions because her father happened to have one of the pagers, and it exploded. From what we can tell, it exploded in her vicinity, and she is now dead as an 8-year-old. Lama Faki continues to say the use of an explosive device whose exact location could not be reliably known would be unlawfully indiscriminate, using a means of attack that could not be directed at a specific military target, and as a result would strike military targets and civilians without distinction. A prompt, impartial investigation into the attacks should be urgently conducted. Now, what does a impartial investigation mean? Well, it means the IDF should not be investigating the IDF. Netanyahu should not be the one investigating the IDF. A third party, ideally a neutral third party, insofar as that's almost impossible to find in this situation, should investigate here. Or, if you can't find a neutral third party, you get 2 or 4 parties that are privy to the conflict that have varying areas of bias here. Some people who are pro-IDF, some people who are anti-IDF, and you get them in on an investigative team to look at these things, and then you try to figure out where the truth is in between those opinions. Because it's going to be very hard to find a neutral party here. But you can't do an internal investigation on this. You can't. An internal investigation on something like this will just lead to the same thing that several police unions end up doing, where they go, oh, well, we investigated ourselves and found out that we didn't murder a black man in the streets. Despite the fact that the gun was in the cop's hand, the camera magically turned off, the bullet from the gun was in the dude's chest, and there was no weapon found on the perpetrator. So, but we definitely didn't do anything wrong. Like, that's what you're going to end up happening. So all in all, this is a very, very fucked up situation. There's nothing about this which is okay. And I mentioned before that war is generally incredibly messy. We do a lot of dehumanizing our enemies in war. We do a lot of protect your brothers in arms when we're doing military training. But once you get to the point where children are starting to get attacked, once you get to the point where civilians are starting to get attacked, when they are starting to be the targets of these attacks, that's really, really wrong. Now, a lot of the articles that I looked up in preparation for this did end up pointing out that several rockets have been launched from Lebanon to Israel during the course of this conflict. And I found that interesting because there weren't a whole lot of casualties, if any casualties at all, from those rocket attacks. Many of them were aimed at basically open areas, the effective version of shooting the ground with a gun. And also, this is a conflict which, like I said, has been going on for decades. This is an expectation if a ceasefire is not put to the table. And Israel doesn't look like it's caring to do a ceasefire right now. It's not looking like it's caring to do a treaty right now. Israel looks like it's caring to advance their front, advance their borders, continue the attack inward. That looks to be their goal right now, as opposed to the goal of trying to circuit peace. They instead seem to be looking for something more akin to victory or domination instead of peace. But that's just my opinion there, from somebody who's got quite a bias here because I'm seeing civilians die, and that's not something I'm really big on. So, that said, I do want to hear from you now. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Briskreek, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.